we're going to be looking at what is talk time, what does it consist of, how do we do it in a really effective way within our classroom, and why is talk time important as well to embed within your classroom and plan for it, program for it in order to build language. We will start with a little activity that we will ask you to participate in. We are a intimate group today, so if you feel confident enough and comfortable enough to answer some of the questions in the chat, we really would love that opportunity. So this question that we want to ask you is, what drink are you today? So not what drink do you feel like having today, but what drink are you today? And so the way you would respond is you would be responding to me, and I am a blank because of blank. You might even respond with, I don't know because blank. Some of the words you might choose to use are Americano, a latte, a frappuccino, a refresher, flat white, or a cup of water. You may not know for a variety of reasons. One being maybe you're not someone who really cares for Starbucks drinks. And so, that gives me a bit of an understanding of some background knowledge that I might need to build, but also some gaps in knowledge that I might need to address. Before you answer in the chat, I will give you a bit of time to think it through and maybe write it out. You can feel free to write it out where you're at in your home language if you have another one, or in English. You may draw out a response that kind of speaks more to you. When you are ready, if in the chat you would be able to just give us a thumbs up, it gives me a signal that you are ready to respond. So I see we have some awesome responses from my fellow consultants here. Okay, so I do see that we have just the 2 responses so far, and that's okay. I'll give it another quick few seconds here in case there is anyone else who would like to add. While we have one of our other teachers adding to the session here, or to the chat here, I will read out a couple that I notice. I am a refresher because the sun is out. Perfect. I am a refresher because I'm feeling jazzy pink that it is almost the end of the day. Excellent. And then I'm a regular coffee because I have no energy left. Perfect. These are all wonderful examples of showcasing where you're at, how you're feeling, and connecting to this content as well. I used it in terms of a drink from Starbucks. So this example is that we modeled here is an example of a strategy called QSSA. And this strategy is really helpful in the classroom to generate some really focused and effective talk time opportunities, while being really mindful of the accessibility of the language for your EAL students, and also by providing them with processing time that they would need in order to generate a response, to generate a statement that showcases their knowledge, and to even participate in a safe and meaningful way for them. You are able to look online. There are a variety of different documents that speak to the QSSA and its effectiveness in the classroom. You might find something like this which showcases examples of how you can connect it to content. So the questions might be very general, they might be very casual in nature, not even connected to content like we did in our example. And actually those ones would be really great ways to start your days in the classroom because it does lower that affective filter. It's something accessible to students. And you do want to be mindful though that it is something that they can connect with. And is universal enough that they have some background of. I will note that we had done a similar activity at one of our universities, and we used a friend's reference, and it kind of fell short because many of our kiddos in university right now don't really have a reference of, who Ross and Monica are and Phoebe. So just being mindful of who your grouping of kiddos are and how to best kind of get that conversation started in the classroom. Here you can see that you can use the multiple ways of signaling within the class that work for your grade level and divisional level. And the STEM just really helps, that sentence frame and sentence stem, if you will, really helps to structure the language. It focuses in on areas that don't really need to be assessed for their content knowledge, but it provides them with the language, the vehicle that they need in order to show their understanding of the content that you have been teaching. And then different ways of sharing their thoughts and their opinions as well. So just thinking about what does talk time do? Why is talk time important? And a few points we wanted to note is that talk time does provide multiple opportunities for students to use and hear content area vocabulary used in context. And so this, again, it's not then just the content vocabulary that is presented by you alone as the teacher, but it is in context of discussion, in opinion, in conversation, even in a casual manner with their peers as well. It provides significant relationship. There is a significant relationship, sorry, to oral proficiency in English and then reading and writing proficiency. So in engaging in talk time that is facilitated, supported, and scaffolded, it really is helping build literacy skills for our students within the classroom, both English language learners and our native English speakers. And again, having the opportunity to speak in the supported way really does help to enhance the safety of the classroom, allowing kiddos to take risks, allowing them to feel a bit more comfortable in engaging in a new language, although they are still maybe emerging in that language in terms of the pronunciation and the most accurate words that they could be using. So another question that I will pose to the group here today is, what percentage of class time do you think should be structured student talk time? The signal that you would give me when you feel ready, it would be when you maybe a thumbs up in the chat in this medium, but in the classroom, you would maybe ask students, they could do a thumbs up next to their chest. They might put a specific signal on the desk that they're ready. Even hands up would be appropriate. The stems that you would use to help answer this question are I think or I believe that, it seems to me that, and in my opinion. Okay, see Aurelia is ready. And Aurelia, if you'd like to, you can go ahead and put in your stem in the chat as well. So for many of us as teachers, we love to showcase, share our knowledge and provide students with models of language and of content understanding. But oftentimes that can seem as though it's a lot of us talking and not as much of them engaging in conversation about the topic. And so even in our presentation today, we're not necessarily modeling it in the best way. We're trying to engage as much as possible in a safe way where, the participants here can participate within the chat. But in a classroom, we'd want to hear that conversation. So on the next slide, you'll see that the actual breakdown, we have 30% and 70%. And I think if we click forward, we'll be able to see how that's who is actually speaking the 30% and who is speaking the 70%. So I'll just pop one back there. So just to showcase that actually within the classroom, the teacher should be talking about 30% of the time, and then the students we would be supporting them to talk 70% of the time to engage in content and to help build fluency in the English language as well as vocabulary and sentence structure. Our next slide here just showcases a quote that really connects quite meaningfully to this topic, and it's the idea is that to make sure that each time the spotlight is shined on a particular student, that student leaves the exchange having experienced success. And that is so important that we are shifting that talking opportunity and discussion to a place where students are engaged in it, but we are providing them with the best supports in order to do that, and in order to build from that, those opportunities. Something to keep in mind as you are programming for your talk time is who is doing the talking. Many of our EAL students tend to be quite passive observers within the classroom during discussions and activities. For a number of reasons, they may be feeling not as confident to engage. They may not have the actual proficiency to be able to engage either. And often their participation is very limited to, if they are engaging, very short responses and usually to teacher questions. They may not feel confident quite yet to participate in conversation on content with their peers. And oftentimes, keeping in mind, our EAL students will also be hesitant to respond in front of a whole class. So, putting in place some strategies and supports that allow them to have that processing time, providing them with sentence frames to give them the language they need to be able to access the content, and to engage in it in a meaningful way within discussion, but then also allowing them to maybe just turn to a partner and have those conversations rather than answer in whole group, is really allowing them to be able to build their proficiency skills and feel comfortable within the classroom. And why does talk matter? So, a few reasons here that we wanted to point out is that there provides you with interaction and collaboration that support deeper understanding. So, through these talk time opportunities that are going to be modeled and facilitated by yourself, the teacher, you have opportunities to correct some language, to expand on vocabulary as well. It also helps conversationally to help students clarify and refine some of the thinking, applying what they're thinking, the words that they have in order to, share opinions and ideas. It gives them also ways to have to sort of negotiate their understanding of the conversation, and think critically as they're engaging, with that back and forth conversational piece with another peer. And then last, these structured talk opportunities do build student confidence and competence, which is really important and which is, kind of the goal of what we're doing when we're looking at the benchmarks and trying to target and explicitly teach those language outcomes. Before we move to the next slide, I'll just really wanted to note a few other pieces that Talk Time provides students with is the opportunity to really internalize some of that vocabulary. Providing those sentence frames, you're giving them, a really strong model of how to structure sentences, being mindful of grammar, and it helps them to build their fluency of the language as well. And for teachers, these talk time opportunities really provide us with even opportunities to assess formatively, to identify where there might be gaps in both content knowledge, but also in their language proficiency. So it is providing both areas, both the teacher and the student, with areas or areas to be able to assess linguistic growth. And then here we just have some talk time tips. So looking at how you would be structuring talk time in your classroom, Aurelia will be going into the next couple of slides just in a minute or two here, on just some really great strategies and resources you can use and how it might look in your class. But some of the tips to consider are modeling how discussions should look. So as a teacher, this may mean modeling the structure of a discussion or conversation to demonstrate that balanced serve and return conversation. Also allowing for lots of wait time. This is important not just for our EAL students, but for many of our students, also thinking in terms of differentiating for our diverse learners as well. This time for processing and translating back and forth from home language and English for our English language learners really allows them to be able to showcase what they really do know. It provides a lot of opportunity to practice. continuous practice will increase students' confidence in their acquired language and build that communicative competence as well. It also creates rules of engagement. So all our students, our native English speakers as well, really do need modeling and support in what the expectations are around academic discussions and engaging in conversations, creating comfort and safety for all members of the group to share ideas and opinions. So this provides them with that, that practice. Also, keeping in mind, varying the size and composition of the student groups is really important because you do want to differentiate the type of sentence frames that you are providing. So for some of your emergent EAL learners, you may be providing them with accessible sentence frames, at a level that is appropriate for their proficiency level. And as you look at students who are more proficient in English and are native English speakers, you may be engaging them in more academic sentence frames as well. Our talk time will also support academic language. So this is a place where you can explicitly teach and allow students that exposure and practice in the academic vocabulary that they will need to be able to, engage in classroom activities and content areas. And then outside of the classroom, in the community and further as they continue their pathway from junior high to high school into the workforce as well. Something that Aurelia will also touch on in our next few slides is incorporating vertical meetings. So allowing students to engage in language, not just at their desks, but actually encouraging them to move around the classroom. So maybe setting up sentence frames and talk stations around the classroom because that movement, that connected language to movement and full body experience, if you will, is something that will help them to really boost that engagement, but also connect in that sort of neurological way to making, bridging language and building their linguistic skills in English. And finally, selecting engaging and relevant topics is so important because, again, you want something where students are excited to and can engage in the conversation in a meaningful way, because then you will see a lot of buy-in from the kiddos and you'll see the depth of the discussion will be a lot more to be able to identify for you, again, where there may be areas of growth still or where there's huge areas of celebration. So that is a piece to really keep in mind as you are planning for your talk time opportunities in your class. And so now I'll pass it along to Aurelia, and she's going to go through a few talk time activities that you can embed into your classroom program.
Thank you so much, Stacy. You did such a great job of explaining the importance of talk time. We're going to go through a few different ways that you can incorporate talk time into all subject areas in your classrooms. These ideas are versatile and they're not dependent on subject or grade level that you teach. We'll take a closer look at how some of these activities can support bringing talk time to life in your classroom. A few of them include sorting, sequencing, and ranking activities. These encourage collaboration and conversation with peers while also boosting critical thinking. Ranking activities are dependent on students being able to express their opinion, and we all know that junior high students really love to do that. So it tends to be really engaging for students. If you embed visuals into these activities, it tends to remove the barrier of language and provide students with an opening into the activity. Responding to visuals, using visuals and imageries that students have a relationship to or have previous knowledge about really tends to provoke inquiry and encourages students to reuse vocabulary that they've previously learned in other lessons or activities. This can be done using the PWIM or picture word induction model method, which can be built over multiple lessons and can really build from starting with speaking and build all the way up to building in some writing activities as well. Would you rather? We know students love to share their opinion using Would You Rather, and this is a really great activity because it can be customized so easily to so many different topics. It encourages students to state their opinion, but also it encourages students to provoke conversation with others when their opinion differs from others. It builds relevancy, and it also feels a little bit like a game. Brainstorming invites students to share their previous understandings and provides teachers with formative and baseline information. This can take the form of a whole class activity, or it could be done in smaller groups, and it can be done independently as well, allowing students to have a few minutes to brainstorm prior to doing something like a poem or doing something like a sorting, ranking, or sequencing activity is a great addition that allows students to build some independent language as well. And like Stacey mentioned, you can do this using vertical surfaces, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. We all know students love games, especially games like headbands or board games that elicit some of the vocabulary that students might not use all the time in academic settings, like games like Who's There, or games where students have to describe things. They provide a fun and engaging engineered social situation where students need to use some of their conversational language. Hands-on activities like puzzles or scavenger hunts encourage movement all around the room, and they really tend to engage those busy learners. They also encourage collaborative opportunities for students to speak. A few more talk time activities that we love. I'll go through a few ideas for you here. You can explore we'll explore activities like Tarzia puzzles. These ignite conversation. They are jigsaw. It's a jigsaw activity, kind of like a puzzle. Students have to solve. Each piece has a question and an answer on it, and then students match the question to the correct answer. These can really easily be generated online. And I've even had students actually generate the Tarzia puzzle and then share it with the class. So that is a nice way to get students to take some leadership in their learning as well. Um, Using Realia in the classroom is just another way to say bringing in real life objects to the classroom. And this often ignites more conversation than just your kind of digital image, because students can feel it, and you can talk about the texture, and you can talk about the different feelings of the objects, heavy and light. It just elicits a little bit more conversation, and because it's a more familiar object for students to hold. And another great thing about talk time is it doesn't all need to be so formally planned. And sometimes you have a few minutes extra at the end of your class that you are like, well, this is a great time for some of that structured talk time. It can be as simple as posing a question using a think, pair, share strategy, or turn and talk to the person beside you. A game like Hot Seat was always my favorite when we had a few minutes left in class. One student sits at the front of the class, and they have their back facing the whiteboard. A word will be either held up or written on the whiteboard behind that student, and then the class's job is to give hints for that student in the hot seat to be able to guess what the word is. Games like Telephone are really familiar to a lot of students, but it starts with one student choosing a word to start a sentence, or a phrase or a story, and then they pass that word on to the student beside them, and then they add on to the initial word, creating a longer message. This encourages that listening skill really strongly, but it also elicits some of that sentence structure skills by having students add on to the phrase. It can be really funny to see what the sentence or phrase ends up being when it gets around the circle. Another really quick, versatile game that I actually played at Christmas with my family this year was Name Five Things. So if you choose a topic or a letter, you can choose you basically would have to name 5 things that have to do with that chosen topic. And so, for example, if the teacher says name 5 animals, the group could collaborate, or you could have students play independently if they're a little bit stronger, to raise their hand and then share when they're ready to name 5 things. I used to pair that with my alpha box, and we would do name 5 things, and they would have to name 5 things in each of the alphabets. Or if I said vowels, they'd have to name 5 things, like 5 animals with the vowels. So lots of fun ways to play some games with students. I know Stacey mentioned earlier a little bit about vertical surfaces, and I know you've probably seen these white books around the district, or you have some in your classroom yourself. But chat stations is a really great way to engage some of the engage students in a vertical learning activity. And so you can see on the chat station in the image that there's some sort of prompt for students. There's an image or there's a series of images that students are able to take a look at, and then in a small group, they are discussing or working on some sort of activity related to that. The great thing about chat stations is that it really encourages movement. It wakes up the brain, and it's proven to improve a student's attention span. Like I stand at my desk quite a bit, and I'm always walking around during the day, and I do find it keeps my brain going. Emotional engagement, students really enjoy activities like this because they're talking with their peers, they're engaging with the material a little bit more, which is shown to increase their retention. It allows that connection with background knowledge because students are able to generally have some information or some vocabulary associated with the image or prompt ahead of time. Some ideas for chat stations is to use an image or an artifact that would be posed onto the chat station. Another idea is to provide groups with one whiteboard marker, and that one whiteboard marker allows for students to have to negotiate what they are going to write down on that white book or vertical surface before they write it down, because they don't all have a whiteboard marker to share their opinion. You could put a quote, you could put a map, you could have a debate or a controversial issue, something like a would you rather. This works really well in math, and if you put up a math problem, especially with one whiteboard marker, and students are forced to converse about the answer to the problem. Here on this slide, we've included a few chat station templates that you might want to try out with your students. So the one on the left is if students are just to maybe hit up one chat station throughout that lesson, but the one on the right allows for students to move from chat station to chat station. That could be really good if you're doing some sort of controversial opinion or would you rather or some sort of math question where you want them to be able to move to multiple chat stations throughout a lesson. The one on the left is more so if you're kind of doing an artifact or some sort of image where you're having students kind of pose at one chat station. Another really fun talk time game is Mystery Box. And so with Mystery Box, I'm sure we've all played it before, but sometimes it's just affirming your practice and remembering some of these things. You can use a box, you could use a bag, but if you have a mystery item in a bag, this is really great for some of that descriptive language that we look for. You would prompt students to be able to ask, say, 20 questions or 15 questions or 10 questions to be able to guess what the item is in the bag. I love this because it can become very subject specific. So it could be a very specific object to a science lesson, or it could be a very specific object to a health lesson. But also you could just make it fun. Another great thing about this is you can sometimes say to the student who wins or the student who guesses what's in my mystery bag, then tomorrow it's their job to bring in the mystery item. Sorry about that. So the idea is that students would start asking you questions, and then until they came to the answer of what is in your mystery bag. Sorry. I wanted to introduce this book to you. It's a fabulous read, and I know it's in a lot of Learning Commons, so you might just have to ask your Learning Commons librarian where it might be, but it's called Talk, Read, Talk, Write, and it's by Nancy Motley. And so Talk, Read, Talk, Write is it is designed kind of around a thinking routine essentially, but I like to think of it as like a layered cake. And so all of these layers of the cake work together, or like an ice cream cake, kind of to be this wonderful dessert. So the idea is that for every time students read and write, they talk twice. And so the thinking routine really starts with talking. So students would engage in a discussion related to the topic. They're going to share their thoughts, they're going to share their ideas, all of their prior knowledge, maybe build some vocabulary. And then students might be able to read a relevant text that's also on that topic. They could do it individually, they could do it collaboratively. And then that would kind of gather or deepen their understanding of the topic. The idea is then to come back together and then talk again. So now students have read, they've deepened their understanding a little bit about the topic. Let's come back together as a group or a small group and reflect on what connections we've made in our head. And then finally, they might be ready to write. So by this point, they've built vocabulary, they've talked about their prior knowledge, that they've shared their thoughts, they've collaborated, they've read to deepen their understanding, and they've reflected on their connections to what the topic. And at this point, this could include, you could ask a student to write a summary, a reflection, an analysis, or any other type of written work. And so this idea of this cyclical model of talk, read, talk, write is a really great way to kind of layer your lessons. And so we know we do a lot of writing in our classrooms. And so if you could build in some of that talk, read, talk before that writing piece, you might see some success with your English language learners. In math, there's various ways that you can incorporate some talk time. We talked a little bit about some of the vertical chat stations. Which ones do not belong are really great activities. Math talks, having students talk out how they came to the answer of a problem is a really great strategy. And having students then also question each other. How did you come to that strategy? I agree with you because of this? Or can you convince the rest of us that that answer makes sense? So teaching students how to converse about the math is an important strategy. And you'll see on the screen there that there are some question frames that you might want to teach your class so that they can talk together. Clothesline math is another great idea because you can set up a clothesline or two in your classroom. You can have students work on these clotheslines and pair answers together. It's a really great warm-up activity. You could use it for counting. You could use it for number families. You could be using it for division as well. I could see this working. And if you set up multiple clotheslines in your class, it could be a collaborative activity in small groups. Awesome. On the new curriculum website, we have some ELAL talks. And so these include Morphology Monday, Texty Tuesday, Wordy Wednesday, Think About It Thursday, and Fluency Friday. There's some really great ways to elicit some talk time in your classroom here, and Rebecca's linked it in the chat. So thank you, Rebecca. We can start with some other really simple activities too, like icebreakers for ELLs so that they feel comfortable and engaging in conversation as we scaffold. As students start to feel more comfortable, it'll lower their affective filter and we can continue to increase talk time. That's another thing about talk time is it's very similar to the Daily 5 method where you might have to start really, really, really small and then build stamina with talk and kind of expand the talk time as students lower that affective filter. Would You Rather is a really fun, great game to play. Two truths and a lie, especially when students start to build their language and they can create the two truths and a lie. Continue. The story is very similar to telephone that we talked about earlier. Desert Island is a really fun one because you'll choose the rule, but you don't tell anybody the rule. And then you tell students that you're going to Desert Island and tell them what you're bringing. And so you're going to basically ask students who's coming with me and then choose a student and then what are you bringing? And then you'll see that you'll continue to ask students what they're bringing to the desert island, but it has to follow the rule. So if they don't follow that made up rule that you invented, they can't come to the island with you. Think, Pair, Synthesize is a thinking mat actually. So you can definitely print this off, laminate it. I'd make it a little bit bigger than your normal letter size piece of paper. But I like the idea of laminating it because you can reuse it often in your classroom. So the thinking mat would go between a partner pair, and essentially students would, you would present an idea or a concept to students, and then students would start to write down their first initial thoughts when they were prompted with that concept. And then we're going to actually start to pair. We're going to think, or we're going to pair, sorry. So students are going to come together as a pair and they're going to discuss their initial thoughts. And then you'll see where the 3 is, there's some question starters. So after you have come together with some initial thoughts, can we synthesize what we've discussed? What is our takeaway? And then some sentence starters as well. So students eventually have to synthesize their answers to come together to create a thought based on the concept that you've presented. So students each have a side of the mat that they can write their initial thoughts, then their thoughts after discussion, and then their synthesized opinion would go in the middle of the thinking mat. Another great resource that we'll share with you with the link in the chat is the Desktop Cooperative Learning Strategy. This is really nice to just print and have on your desk as a teacher because we know that planning takes so much time, but sometimes you just need another activity or you need to think on a whim and something you planned isn't going well. So this is great because I think there's about 30 different activities that would elicit talk time in your classroom, but could be done very quickly. So not a lot of pre-prep that is needed. So like the human continuum, and then it explains in the document what the human continuum is, or graffiti, or a gallery walk, or card sorts. So you'll see that each activity is explained really thoroughly. If you need something really quick to do in your classroom, it's great to share with teachers as well because there's about 30 different talk time activities there that can be just done really easily. And something that I really like to share, and especially in our ELD classrooms, but definitely for every EAL student, are advocacy statements and survival language. So these are very important to ensure that students, all students of all language proficiencies, have a voice in their learning. This supports the ability for students to be able to express their needs, as well as this will impact the student success. If students are able to ask you to slow down or say it one more time, we know that that's going to impact how successful students are in an academic setting. It provides students with a way to engage and advocate as well. So it linked on this slide is a couple different advocacy statements and survival language, as well as the poster that's presented to you on this slide will be provided to you as well. It's great if you could just have these printed off poster size maybe or a little bit smaller and put in every classroom. But remember that they need to be referenced. So teaching students this. If it's on the wall in every classroom, maybe the teacher is referencing that poster every so often and pointing out how students can ask for help if they need it during an independent working activity. Supporting academic language is just as important as that survival language as well. That it comes a little bit later in a student's language proficiency journey, but we want to make sure that we're providing supports to ensure that students have the ability to voice their opinion or voice their thoughts on an academic topic. And so some ways to do that is to provide sentence frames for students or sentence starters for students, but also making sure that we're targeting that academic language. So we have some tiered vocabulary lists for you based on different subjects. So you can see the one on the slide is the science one, but we also have social academic language word lists that you might want to share with your teachers. I wanted to thank you for joining us today. And, I generally would say go take a look at our EPD. It is slightly under construction at the moment. So our team is working really hard to transfer everything over to a Google site just to be a little bit more user friendly. So EPD is still available. When you log on, you just have to scroll down a little bit to find everything that you used to find there. But just know that we are working to move it over to an EAL course site. And so it will start to look different in a little bit here. Oh, I clicked that. If you have not already joined our EAL newsletter, it's a monthly newsletter that comes out with some teaching tips, some book recommendations, a featured country every month. At the beginning of the month, we send that out. And so you can scan the QR code to join our distribution list if you wish. And at this time, I'm going to stop recording. And if you have any questions, I will stick around for a